"Your money is still there," Maya Bennett said, standing in the blue light of the emergency dashboard. "But someone has made every bank believe it is already promised elsewhere." At 2:13 on a rain-heavy Tuesday morning, the private financial network behind Calloway Harbor Logistics froze 19 outgoing payments, rejected 3 collateral confirmations, and displayed a cash deficit large enough to destroy confidence before sunrise. Ethan Calloway, 40, Caucasian, and known across Baltimore as the white mafia boss who settled disputes through contracts rather than force, entered the estate office without a jacket, his dark brown hair slightly disordered and his gray eyes fixed on the numbers. Maya, the 30-year-old African-American maid who managed the night staff at Calloway House, should not have understood a liquidity cascade before the company treasurer arrived. Yet she had stopped the automatic release of payroll reserves by recognizing that the payment sequence was impossible. Ethan asked how she knew. She answered that 6 years earlier she had worked in reconciliation at a regional bank, before a complaint about falsified accounts ended her career more efficiently than any firing letter. She had never told him because the position at his house required references, not explanations. The first alert now carried her old employee identification in its audit trail. Within minutes, Victor Sloan, Ethan's polished chief financial officer, called from the Harbor Exchange building and said the evidence was obvious. Maya's dormant credentials had been used to enter a settlement console just before the attack. He demanded that she be removed from the property and that outside lenders receive a statement blaming a former bank employee acting alone. Ethan watched Maya absorb the accusation without pleading. Then the dashboard changed again. A queue of duplicated obligations appeared against Calloway receivables, making the company look insolvent even though its warehouses, contracts, and customer payments still existed. Ethan understood the real target was not theft. It was market share. If lenders withdrew by noon, a rival consortium could purchase his shipping routes, credit positions, and waterfront options at distressed prices. Maya pointed to one detail Victor had missed. The fraudulent entries treated a restricted reserve as available cash, a mistake only someone with access to both the household trust files and corporate treasury reports could make. Those two systems were supposed to be separated. Ethan had built his power on compartmentalization, and someone had quietly erased the wall. He told Elena Price, his crisis counsel, to seal the estate archive and move all communications to paper logs until the systems were verified. Then he placed a temporary confidentiality agreement before Maya. It gave her access to the financial records, protection from immediate dismissal, and personal liability if she concealed anything. Maya read every line before signing. Ethan signed after her, aware that he had just tied the survival of his organization to the woman his own records accused. Before dawn, Elena returned with the first physical access report. Only 3 people had entered the archive during the previous month: Ethan, Victor, and Maya. Maya did not deny entering the archive. 2 weeks earlier, she had found water beneath a cabinet after a pipe leak and moved several document boxes to a dry shelf while the maintenance crew worked nearby. She recorded the move in the household log, but the electronic access report showed her badge opening the room again at 1:47 that morning, when she had been serving coffee in the estate office beside Ethan. Elena confirmed the camera timestamps placed Maya downstairs, yet the lenders would not wait for a careful explanation. At 6 a.m., 3 banks demanded additional collateral. At 6:20, a major shipping client paused new bookings. By 7 o'clock, market analysts were circulating anonymous claims that Calloway Harbor Logistics had hidden short-term debt. Ethan ordered no threats and no retaliation. He instructed every division to preserve records, answer verified questions, and make no statement that could not survive public review. The discipline surprised Maya. His reputation suggested command through fear, but his actual power came from people knowing he remembered every promise. Still, he treated her as a risk. He assigned a staff room beside the archive, required her to surrender her phone for imaging, and asked Elena to witness every conversation. Maya accepted the restrictions because the old accusation against her had taught her what happened when evidence was controlled by people who preferred a simple villain. As they reviewed paper reserve schedules, she noticed a repeated notation in Victor's handwriting: bridge exposure covered. The phrase appeared beside assets that had no approved bridge facility. Ethan said Victor often used shorthand. Maya replied that shorthand was harmless only when everyone knew what it meant. She then found a discrepancy between the household trust's quarterly statements and the corporate treasury's collateral register. A historic waterfront property, Calloway Pier 7, appeared as unencumbered in one file and pledged to a private lender in another. The pledge was not itself catastrophic, but it explained how the attack could manufacture a liquidity crisis. If lenders believed the same asset supported multiple obligations, they would freeze credit even before proving the duplication. Ethan remembered signing a temporary pledge 8 months earlier during a port strike, but he also remembered ordering Victor to release it after repayment. The release document was missing. Elena called the lender and learned that the pledge remained active in its records. Worse, the document authorizing an extension carried Ethan's verified signature certificate. Maya asked whether Victor controlled the certificate. Ethan said no single executive did. One token remained in his office safe, one with Elena, and one in a secure corporate vault. Elena's token had not been used. Ethan's was physically present. The corporate vault log showed access by Victor at 11:32 p.m., but Victor claimed he had been checking insurance covenants. Maya studied the printed log and found a line spacing difference around that entry, as though a page had been regenerated after the fact. Before they could test it, a courier delivered a formal notice from the rival consortium. It offered to buy Calloway's waterfront rights for cash, valid only until noon. The offer was too precise to be opportunistic. It matched the amount needed to satisfy the morning collateral calls within less than 1%, which meant the consortium knew the internal deficit before the banks had completed their calculations. Ethan wanted to reject it immediately, but Maya asked what refusal would cost. Payroll would clear that afternoon only if 2 lenders restored access or Ethan liquidated personal assets. Vendors could tolerate a short delay. Hourly workers could not. His first instinct was to protect ownership, yet Maya forced him to see that market share was not an abstract contest when families depended on Friday deposits. Ethan authorized Elena to request a 2-hour extension from the banks and prepared to place a personal real estate holding into escrow. It would not solve the entire problem, but it would demonstrate good faith without surrendering Pier 7. Maya then examined the rival consortium's letterhead under lamplight. The document contained no readable tracking code, but the paper carried a faint compression pattern from an office printer. Calloway House used the same model in only one location, Victor's executive suite. The pattern did not prove he printed the offer, because the Harbor Exchange building had similar equipment, yet it connected the supposedly external demand to Ethan's own infrastructure. At 8:15, Victor arrived at the estate in a navy overcoat, carrying a binder and an expression of controlled alarm. He said the company needed a decisive leader, not a former bank clerk making theories. He recommended accepting the offer, issuing a statement about a rogue credential, and replacing the payment system after the sale. Ethan asked why the offer exactly matched the collateral calls. Victor said sophisticated buyers estimated such things. Maya asked why he had described her as a former bank clerk before Ethan disclosed her history. Victor paused briefly and said human resources files were available to senior management. Maya knew her original application listed domestic service and community bookkeeping, not the bank. Ethan noticed the pause. He did not accuse Victor. He asked Elena to retrieve the personnel archive. Victor objected that delay would destroy the company. Ethan answered that a rushed sale based on compromised records would destroy it more completely. The personnel file contained an unsigned supplemental page describing Maya's old investigation, inserted beneath a later background check. The page was printed after she was hired. Victor said he had never seen it. Elena found that the document was added during an internal compliance review he had supervised. Maya recognized the language as copied from the accusation that ended her banking career, including one sentence that had never appeared in the public decision. Only the bank's legal team and the unknown person who supplied the false records could have known it. She felt the room narrow around her, not from fear, but from the realization that the present attack had been prepared long before she entered Calloway House. Ethan asked whether Victor had worked with her former bank. Victor said the question was insulting. Elena opened the corporate history file. Before joining Calloway, Victor had served as an outside consultant to that bank during the year Maya was blamed. Victor recovered quickly. He explained that he had advised the bank on cost controls and had never reviewed Maya's case. He offered to provide engagement letters, then warned that personal suspicion was distracting them from a collapsing balance sheet. Ethan let him speak because confidence revealed more than pressure. Victor's binder proposed selling Pier 7, terminating 2 smaller routes, and replacing Calloway's treasury team with an external platform selected by him. The platform belonged to a firm whose investors overlapped with the rival consortium through a chain of holding companies. Elena had traced the overlap while Victor talked. He called it ordinary finance. Maya called it a path from manufactured panic to permanent control. The allegation was still not enough. A court, a lender, or a board would require authenticated records showing that Victor had altered collateral, misused credentials, or coordinated the timed offer. Ethan refused to treat instinct as proof, even though every instinct he possessed warned him. He ordered Victor to remain at the estate as an executive participating in the response, not as a prisoner. Victor agreed with visible offense and asked for a private office. Ethan gave him the library, where Elena could log every call. Meanwhile, Maya returned to the archive. She remembered the water leak because one box had been heavier than its label suggested. It was marked household linens, but contained old partnership agreements from Ethan's father's era. Inside, she found a small brass key taped beneath the lid. Ethan recognized it as belonging to a mechanical deposit drawer in the original Harbor Exchange records room, a drawer excluded from the digital inventory because it predated the renovation. Victor had supervised that renovation. They drove to the building with Elena while the city moved through morning traffic under a low gray sky. Maya wore her navy housekeeping dress beneath a borrowed wool coat, refusing Ethan's suggestion that she change because the uniform explained why people overlooked her. At Harbor Exchange, employees gathered in tense clusters, reading rumors on their phones. Ethan did not address them with promises he could not guarantee. He said payroll was protected for the day, records were under review, and no sale would occur without verified facts. The statement steadied the room more than a denial would have. In the old records corridor, the brass key opened a narrow drawer containing microfilm receipts, notarized releases, and one red ledger. The ledger documented temporary collateral movements during previous emergencies. Most entries matched official records. The final 6 did not. They transferred short-term claims among shell entities using code names rather than legal names. Maya recognized one code name from her former bank case, North Lantern. It had been listed as a customer account she supposedly manipulated, though she had testified that it did not belong to any real client. The ledger showed North Lantern receiving fees from every disputed transfer, including the extended pledge on Pier 7. Ethan asked who controlled it. A folded ownership declaration lay inside the back cover, but the signature page had been removed. Only the notary registration number remained, and Elena knew exactly where to verify it. The notary registration belonged to a retired Maryland attorney whose seal records were stored with the state archive. Elena requested an emergency certified copy, but the archive estimated several hours. The banks had granted only 90 additional minutes. Ethan could raise enough cash by selling a minority interest in his most profitable shipping route, yet the buyer would gain influence over pricing and gradually erode the very market share the attack was designed to seize. Maya proposed a different approach. Disclose the suspected collateral fraud to the lenders before they discovered it through rumors, provide the red ledger under controlled review, and ask them to distinguish operational cash from disputed pledges. Ethan saw the danger. Voluntary disclosure could trigger broader audits, expose old family arrangements, and weaken his authority with partners who relied on privacy. Maya said secrecy had already become Victor's strongest asset. If Ethan protected the appearance of control, he might preserve his reputation for a day and lose the company for years. He asked whether she would make the same choice if her own name were not tied to the attack. She answered that her name was precisely why she understood the cost of silence. 6 years earlier, bank leaders had avoided public embarrassment by accepting a false internal report. Their quiet solution became her permanent accusation. Ethan looked at the red ledger, then called the lenders himself. He disclosed the duplicate pledge, the suspected misuse of credentials, and physical records indicating coordination. He offered supervised access to the archive and placed his personal holding in escrow as support. The banks suspended the noon sale deadline pending document review. The liquidity crisis stopped accelerating. That choice changed something between Ethan and Maya. He had trusted her judgment in a matter that could dissolve his power, and she had placed truth above the satisfaction of seeing a powerful man humbled. Victor learned of the disclosure and accused Ethan of surrendering private affairs to outsiders. Ethan replied that privacy was not permission to falsify obligations. Victor then produced his own evidence, a printed message thread in which Maya appeared to discuss North Lantern with an unknown contact 3 days earlier. The messages referred to opening the old account and forcing Calloway to choose. Maya said she had never written them. Elena examined the timestamps and noted that they aligned with periods when Maya's phone had been charging in the staff office. Victor insisted that physical possession did not matter if an account had been remotely accessed. Maya asked to see the source export rather than screenshots. Victor said the export was held by an independent investigator. Elena asked for the investigator's name. Victor gave one, but the licensing database showed no active investigator under that identity. Then Ethan's temporary paper log revealed that someone in the library had requested an outside line exactly 4 minutes before the fabricated messages were delivered. Victor had been alone there. When confronted, he said the call concerned insurance. Ethan ordered the call detail preserved. The number belonged not to an insurer, but to the crisis communications firm retained by the rival consortium. Victor finally abandoned the appearance of cooperation. He did not confess, he reframed. He said Ethan's organization had become too cautious to survive a consolidating market, and that selling Pier 7 would merely accelerate an inevitable transition. He claimed he had built the financial architecture that kept Calloway competitive, while Ethan spent years honoring outdated loyalties. If some records had been arranged aggressively, Victor argued, they had served the larger enterprise. Maya asked whether destroying her career had also served the enterprise. Victor looked at her with the impatience of a man forced to acknowledge a detail he considered small. He said her bank case had been a necessary containment. North Lantern was originally used to move consulting fees that senior officers did not want publicly connected to restructuring decisions. Maya noticed inconsistencies and refused to adjust a reconciliation report, so someone had to become responsible for the irregular entries. Victor did not state that he chose her, but his explanation placed him inside the decision. Elena had recorded the conversation with consent notices posted in the crisis room and repeated verbally when he entered. Even so, his words proved knowledge, not authorship of the current attack. Victor realized the same thing. He said no regulator would treat strategic commentary as confession. Then he resigned, effective immediately, and tried to leave with his binder. Ethan stopped him only by citing the confidentiality clause in Victor's employment agreement and requesting that Elena inventory company documents before departure. No physical confrontation occurred. Victor placed the binder on the table, smiling as though he had already won. Inside were liquidity models, lender contacts, and a schedule predicting the exact sequence of morning collateral demands. Each page was labeled as a risk simulation. The model might be legitimate planning, but one assumption exposed him. It anticipated the shipping client's booking pause at 6:20, though that client had made the decision only after receiving an anonymous warning at 6:05. Victor could not have predicted the precise minute unless he knew when the warning would be sent. Elena contacted the client's general counsel and obtained preservation of the original email headers. The message had traveled through a commercial service that masked the sender, but payment records for the service could be subpoenaed. Ethan wanted faster proof because every hour weakened confidence. Maya returned to the screenshots Victor had produced. The fabricated messages used her full first name in a greeting. Everyone at Calloway House called her Maya, but her old bank account had been registered under Mayana, a formal name she no longer used. Victor's supplemental personnel page contained Mayana because it copied the old case file. The fake message began, Mayana, open the old account. Whoever wrote it was not imitating her current life. He was reconstructing her from a 6-year-old record. Elena added the linguistic error to the evidence package. At that moment, the State Archive transmitted the certified notary copy. The missing signature page identified North Lantern's controlling manager as Victor Sloan. The certified page connected Victor to the shell entity, but Ethan knew the confrontation still required public verification. Elena arranged a joint review at Harbor Exchange with the lenders, the company's independent auditor, and representatives of the shipping client. Victor attended through counsel. Before the meeting, Ethan offered Maya the option to stay at Calloway House. Maya said absence would let Victor describe her as a hidden source rather than a witness. She entered the conference room in her Navy uniform, low bun neat, posture calm, carrying the household paper log. Ethan introduced her by full name and stated that she had identified the duplicate obligations before any senior officer. He did not call her an assistant or analyst to make her seem more acceptable. He named the work she actually performed and the expertise she had brought with her. The auditor first validated the red ledger's age, paper stock, and sequence. The notary copy established Victor's control of North Lantern. The corporate vault vendor then supplied a backup access record that had not been overwritten by Calloway's local system. It showed Victor entering the vault at 11:32 p.m. and using the signature certificate to extend the Pier 7 pledge. The local printed log had been regenerated afterward. Next, the communications firm produced billing information under legal demand. North Lantern had paid for the anonymous warning sent to the shipping client and for the false message package involving Maya. Victor's counsel argued that North Lantern had legitimate consulting functions and that automated vendors could have acted without his direct instruction. Maya placed the paper crisis log beside the billing timestamps. Victor's library call matched the service order confirmation to the minute. Elena then played the recorded statement in which Victor described Maya's old case as necessary containment. The lenders asked him to explain how he knew non-public details. He answered that he had reviewed historical files for risk management. The auditor asked why the same shell entity received fees from both the old bank irregularities and the current disputed pledges. Victor said the name had been reused. That answer collapsed when the state filing showed continuous ownership. Ethan faced the choice Victor had designed for him: protect Calloway's private network by negotiating a quiet resignation, or expose the records and accept regulatory scrutiny. Ethan announced that the company would submit the full evidence package, restate any affected filings, and open an independent review of every North Lantern transaction. He also released Pier 7 from all planned sale negotiations. The lenders restored limited payment access based on verified receivables rather than disputed collateral. Payroll cleared. The rival consortium withdrew its deadline offer after learning the records would become evidence. Victor's market share strategy had failed because the crisis was no longer private. Yet as the room emptied, Maya received an email from her former bank. Its board wanted to discuss correcting her employment record, but only if she signed a settlement that prohibited her from describing what had happened. The proposed settlement offered Maya money, a neutral reference, and a confidential correction stored where almost no future employer would see it. 6 years earlier, she might have accepted simply to stop carrying the accusation. Now she understood that a hidden correction could preserve the same system that had harmed her. Ethan did not tell her what to do. He arranged for Elena to review the agreement independently and left the decision with Maya. Even though her public testimony could deepen scrutiny of North Lantern and extend the crisis around Calloway, that restraint mattered more than any promise. Maya rejected the confidentiality condition and requested a public amended finding, reimbursement of lost wages, and a written explanation that the original case relied on falsified records supplied by an outside consultant. The bank resisted for 2 days. During those days, Calloway Harbor Logistics operated under restricted credit, competitors offered discounts to nervous clients, and reporters treated every delayed invoice as evidence of collapse. Ethan responded with verified weekly disclosures: cash on hand, receivable collections, collateral status, and payroll completion. He hated exposing the company's internal rhythm, but transparency rebuilt confidence faster than aggressive statements. Maya helped design the reconciliation format while continuing her household duties by choice, not because Ethan expected her to serve 2 roles for 1 salary. He offered a formal position in Treasury Controls with a contract naming her authority, compensation, and right to report concerns directly to the audit committee. She asked for 1 additional clause: no employee could be blamed publicly for a systems incident before independent evidence review. Ethan accepted it and extended the protection to every worker. The bank eventually issued a public correction after its own records confirmed Victor's consulting access and North Lantern's payments. Maya's name was cleared in language visible to future employers. Victor faced civil claims, regulatory investigation, and removal from all Calloway accounts. The story did not end with a dramatic arrest. It ended with documents becoming impossible to ignore. 3 months later, restricted credit was lifted. Calloway retained Pier 7, restored the paused shipping contract, and gained new business from clients who valued its public controls. The company did not dominate every route, but it survived the market share war without surrendering its standards. Maya became Director of Reconciliation Integrity while keeping a small apartment on the estate grounds during the transition. Her relationship with Ethan changed slowly. He stopped summoning her through staff channels and asked for her time directly. She challenged his assumptions in meetings, and he protected her authority when older executives tried to treat her as symbolic. Neither called the trust between them romance, because both knew words could become another form of pressure. One evening, after the final independent report cleared all disputed obligations, Ethan asked whether she would have dinner with him away from the estate, with no contract, no work agenda, and no expectation beyond one honest evening. Maya said yes, but only after confirming that declining would change nothing professionally. Ethan agreed in writing because responsibility had become the language she trusted. Their first free choice began where the binding crisis agreement ended. By spring, the blue emergency dashboard had been replaced by a plain reconciliation board visible to every authorized department. The design was Maya's, built from the lesson that uncertainty became dangerous when authority hid behind complexity. She no longer wore the Navy housekeeping uniform at Harbor Exchange, though she kept it carefully folded at home because it reminded her that competence had existed before anyone granted it a title. Ethan remained the mafia boss whose influence crossed shipping, credit, and property, but his leadership changed under public scrutiny. He separated family trusts from company collateral, established an independent audit committee, and ended the private exceptions Victor had exploited. Elena's final report reconstructed the entire scheme. Victor had used North Lantern to preserve leverage from his earlier banking work, inserted Maya's history into her personnel file as a future scapegoat, extended the Pier 7 pledge with the corporate signature certificate, and commissioned false communications timed to trigger collateral calls and client panic. The rival consortium had not designed the attack, but it had been prepared to benefit from confidential figures Victor supplied through intermediaries. The cyber incident itself had not emptied Calloway's accounts. It had altered how institutions interpreted obligations, creating a temporary belief that every dollar was already claimed. That distinction allowed the company to recover, but only because Maya recognized the pattern and Ethan chose disclosure over control. The board restored all suspended employee benefits and funded an emergency reserve that could not be pledged without 3 independent approvals. Ethan supported her without taking credit. Their personal relationship developed outside the office with the same deliberate care. Maya refused gifts that felt like compensation. Ethan learned to offer attention instead of solutions. When he eventually asked her to build a life with him, he did not present a ring or a contract. He presented a question and enough silence for a real answer. Maya said she would not move into Calloway House as an employee, dependent, or protected secret. She would enter only as an equal whose work, money, and choices remained her own. Ethan accepted every condition because they were not barriers to love. They were proof that love was voluntary. Maya moved into a renovated wing with a separate office and legal ownership rights recorded in her name. The household staff reported to a professional manager, removing any confusion about her role. At the opening of the new Pier 7 Community Logistics Center, Ethan publicly credited Maya with saving both the company and its conscience. She corrected him gently. She had shown the evidence, but he had chosen what to do with it. He answered that the choice was easier because she stood beside him. The market share war ended without a conqueror. It ended with a company that could be trusted, a woman whose name was restored, and a man who finally understood that power meant little unless another person remained free to walk away.